Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the River Falls Public Library. Tonight we have M. Loerzel with the Humble Horse Organization. Dr. M is White Earth Ojibwe and feels strongly about the wellness and future of her community and other Indigenous ones. She has her PhD from the University of Washington, Seattle. She is currently an assistant professor in social work at UW River Falls. M is the founder of the Humble Horse, a nonprofit organization dedicated to the education and preservation of the Ojibwe horse and their relationship to the Anishinaabe people. She strives to bring more Indigenous perspectives into research, the classroom, and the thriving of future Indigenous social workers and researchers. I'm going to hand it over to M.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction. Because we are on the beautiful shared land of the Ojibwe and Dakota people, I would be in really poor form if I didn't introduce myself in my own language. So, Buju and Ninwe Maganadug, Anin, Nadamage Kwe Indigenous, Wabanesi and Dodem, White Earth Indigenous, or White Earth and Donjaba, Chicago Da, Spring Valley Da, Ojibwe Anishinaabe and Dao, Medewanakwe and Dao Mityu. So what you just heard right there was a traditional Ojibwe protocol greeting. My name is M, or Dr. M. That's really weird and feels like illegal a little bit, but it's not. Very newly minted as of August. And very, very excited to be here. I know we planned this back in like a while ago, I think in May or even earlier. So I'm as sad as I am of not being able to bring the ponies, I can tell you they would be getting into everything if they were in this room with me. They would probably try to, eat your hat, or they're really good at pickpocketing, actually. Expert pickpocketers. So I learned this from our head trainer, Leah, that their lips are called prehensile lips, which is very, very similar to an elephant trunk. So we call them finger lips. And that's how they kind of use to that's what they use to explore the world. They're very good at lock picking and breaking over lock. They like to commit multiple B&Es, breaking and exiting, because grass is better, right, over there. I no longer carry around treats in my pocket because they will find it, and they will take my keys. They also really love zippers. So Anishinaabe, Mishtadem, right? So what that means is Ojibwe horse, or Anishinaabe horse. So Anishinaabe traditionally refers to kind of the umbrella term of three distinct groups of people: Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi. And so each of those groups have their own distinct language, but the fun fact is a lot of them are very similar. So what in Ojibwe we might say buju, which is hello. Potawatomi folks might say pojo, so that P, right? But it's really, really similar. So Anishinaabe is just, it means the original people. But the most beautiful thing that Anishinaabe directly translates to are the humble people. If you start thinking about the name of our organization, the Humble Horse, that's where that comes from. It's also a little bit of play on words because it literally translates to people who are lowered down to the earth, and ponies are kind of smaller and shorter and a little lower to the ground. So there's a little bit of a double entendre there. This is me. It's important for me to show who I am and where I'm from. This is my dad. This is my grandma. This is my other grandma. So I am self-lovingly referred to as Ojibwe, Polish Ojibwe. I grew up outside of from Chicago. I did not grow up around horses. And when you grow up outside of Chicago, it's not around here where, like, you can afford a horse even if you're working class. right? To have horses in Chicago, that means land, and land means a lot of money and a lot of time, which both of my parents are very working class folks. I'm actually the first one to go to college and to get a PhD in my immediate family. So that was fun. But I wouldn't have done it without these folks. And so I always just show who my family is and who the people who are important to me. I should put a picture of my husband over there, but he's right there if anybody needs a reference. He's also very important and is also one of our day-to-day caretakers, very much so. And then there's Auntie Leah, who's the head trainer and auntie to the ponies. My husband and I call them the kids because that's kind of what they are. They're people, and what you'll kind of realize throughout this talk is that I think it's really interesting because the first thing people think about horses is, oh, we ride them. We use them for something, right? And I like to kind of think about that, right? Would you say that about like a family member? Kind of weird, right? I'd be like, what? Right? And a lot of times that's what how we view these horses traditionally, and it should be contemporarily, but colonization has done a little bit of a number on how we look at our animals, and also where humans place themselves kind of in the natural world of things, right? A lot of times we think that we're big scary apex predator with thumbs, right? We invented electric cars, and we're all these things, right? And we're the best. But if we kind of recenter ourselves through Anishinaabe ethics and Anishinaabe philosophy, then we're back down here. And we're settled within and centered within, maybe not even centered, right? But we are within nature. We have that relationship with each other. And that's how we view these horses, right? We call them our relatives. I'm also involved with the board of the Ojibwe Horse Society, which is the breed registry and group that kind of takes care of making sure that these horses are registered and taken care of. And what we mean when they're registered is they're all DNA tested, right? And if anybody's heard of the cheetahs with genetic bottlenecking, because the population is so small, that's what's happening to our Ojibwe horses. So that being said, it's really important that everyone gets DNA tested. We keep a database down at A&M Texas, and we also work to find best genetic breeding matches so we can ensure that the next 7 generations of horses are healthy and happy, so our next 7 generations of people, right, can also have a relationship with them. Yeah.
For a minute with an urgent but not emergency message. Next door, I'm going to say it on the thing. Next door, they're rehearsing for a play, and so you're going to hear some loud simulated gun noises and explosion. And we're not sure when, but I just want to make sure that you know that it is part of
weirdly appropriate for some parts that we'll be talking about. God, oh wow, that is a little on the nose. All right. I mean, hey, I guess it's in vivo. Didn't know this. Okay, we'll roll with it. So just an agenda today. And I talked about a little bit of some of these things, but I'm just gonna be talking a little bit about what makes this horse so special. And when I say horse, I'm gonna kind of use horse and pony a little bit interchangeably. There is a technical difference. So you've often heard maybe like horses are measured in hands. So 1 hand is equal to 4 inches. So a pony technically is anything smaller than 14.2 hands. I think we have a pony that's like on the cusp. I think Moo. We have a couple of ponies that are on the cusp of like Could be horse, but technically pony. And but if you actually look at them, they actually are a little bit more proportioned like a horse. I like to call them medium horses, like a small medium horse. And in temperament, they're a little bit more horse-like. Ponies have a little bit of a stereotype of being spicy. We have a pony on our property. He's a little 12-hand tank of an Icelandic Arabian mix. He's my husband's pony, and he is very stereotypically pony, very, very sweet, but can be very stubborn and very spicy. Temperament wise, I would say that these horses or ponies are a little bit calmer, because as Leah was saying off camera earlier, these horses, every day we interacted with them, right? And we kind of maybe intentionally or unintentionally bred them to be very friendly and very smart, and also very independent, maybe even a little bit of mischievous, kind of reflecting a little bit of that Ojibwe humor. We like our horses to be a little quirky, right? And these horses definitely are. And then we'll have time for questions and answers. So, which, if we had the ponies here, right, I could kind of show you in person, but I'll just have a lot of pictures. So in this picture, you see Demi, and I believe that's Echo. So we have their kind of official Anishinaabe. So all of our horses have Anishinaabe names. So that would be Demi and Buswewe. We also have ridiculous nicknames for them, because when you deal with horses that have really big personalities, you can't help but, who here has an animal that, like, you have a name that you give to their vet's office, but in reality, behind closed doors, you would be like, it's like, what did you just call them? Like, so Demi, we were calling her Mama because she is a mom. She actually gave birth to a foal last year. And his name is Nimki because he was born during a very large thunderstorm, and it's a thunderbird would be his English translation name. But we call him Tiny because he was very small and he was very tiny. And then eventually Mama became Mama. So it's Mama, and then this is Echo. Echo is now residing up with a family, an Ojibwe family, up in Fond du Lac on their 320-acre bison farm. And they do a lot of outreach and just interaction with community. So we're really happy and excited that we were able to more or less repatriate a relative to a family who really loves him and cares about him. And he was definitely one of our most fearful and skittish horses, but this family that now is caretaking for him has young children, and Echo absolutely loves children, and he's really come out of his shell. So, that's kind of one thing to think about when we're caretaking for these horses is maybe they need a different scene, right? And I guess he wanted buffalo and 328 acres. I don't blame him. Like, same, right? But I'm unfortunately going to make you talk to me. And anybody who has me as a teacher in a class knows that I walk around the room, and if somebody like kind of looks like they're falling asleep, I'll be like, life check, how you doing? Like, what do you think about this question? They're just like, whoa, it's Monday, leave me alone. But I'm actually really, really curious. So some of you, I know, right? You're friends of me, you're friends of the horses, and you've met these wonderful souls and maybe even been slobbered on and pickpocketed by them yourselves. But I'm really curious, for those who haven't met them, what do you associate with horses? First thing that comes to mind. Money. Yeah. Yes. Literally eat money. Yes. The smell. Okay. Friendship. Okay. Some positive ones. What about maybe activities? You two in the back that are laughing, what do you guys think of horses? Ooh, I did the thing that I do in my classes, call people out when they're distracted on their phone. So what do you, oh no, my face is turning red. So what do you associate with horses? Oh, maybe they're big and scary. Maybe you ride them, right? Large puppies. Yep. I still haven't heard an answer from y'all. What do you think? What do you think of horses back there? They're soft. Yeah, their noses are very soft, very velvety, right? But a lot of times people might associate them with, at least, and I'm talking more a little bit from like a Chicago standpoint, right? Because I didn't grow up here. We just moved here a couple years ago. And for me, it's like, it's often associated with having money, right? It's often associated with kind of like a certain maybe socioeconomic class, or it's often associated with a very specific activity, right? You ride horses, right? Some of you said friendship, things like that. But the funny thing is, that wasn't always the case, right? Anishinaabe villages had horses. There are actually stories that up and kind of around a little bit north of us, and in Minnesota, there were huge herds. There was such a large number of these horses that they would be running around like deer. And Anishinaabe villages, right, they were often kind of small groups that oftentimes would kind of travel seasonally to different places. So maybe we'd have our sugar bush grove where we would do maple syruping. Maybe we'd have a fishing spot. Maybe we'd kind of do that and have, but oftentimes we'd have at least semi-permanent villages, right? But these horses, like, we didn't keep them penned up, and they were always just kind of around. They were kind of like the community horses, right? And if you needed help with something like dragging wood or dragging a deer that you had hunted, you could kind of just grab one of these horses and work with them. And a lot of elders will talk about that. We're actually doing a project in tandem as an organization with a couple of researchers and down at University of Wisconsin-Madison and University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, where we talk about the history and the memories that people have, more specifically elders, have of these horses and in Anishinaabe-Moan. So we're really trying to work hard to preserve these and to also gather up more stories, because who here has heard of Ojibwe horses before this? Oh yeah. Yeah, maybe you've like read about it, right? Or maybe you saw this event and you're like, what is an Ojibwe horse? I have never heard of this. We had went to drop something off at a vet's office the other day, and they asked for the breed of horse, and they said Ojibwe, and they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, exactly, right? And so not a lot of people have heard about them, and I'll kind of talk a little bit why that is. But here's another question, right? Where did horses come from? So I see somebody mouthing Spain. Where horses coming? Where did horses come from? Central Asia. Yeah. Any other questions or any other? Sorry. Mongolia. Yep. So yeah, there's a lot of ideas of where, and you'll find that obviously certain breeds of horses come from certain different spaces. We have horses that are Iberian, they're Spanish horses. We have horses that are from Asia, Mongolia. We have Icelandic horses. We have all these different horses from Europe. And you'll kind of find different pockets of like Mustangs, right? The thing about Mustangs is that they were maybe originally from Spanish stock, and then they were let go by different cavalry members that they didn't want to, or ranchers, they just didn't want to take their horses, or they couldn't, or whatever, and so be free, right? And those are those descendants of those horses. What I can tell you genetically is that they are very different from Mustangs. There is a lot of genetic research done out of A&M, Texas, that actually look and see, okay, what are the similarities and what are the differences? Ojibwe ponies are a very distinct breed. There is now kind of new emerging evidence and research saying that Native people had contact with horses 600 years before they had contact with European settlers. I don't have the answer, right? I wasn't there 600, 700, 800 years ago, or else I would have very much share my skincare routine with you. But what I can tell you is that even though I don't have the answer, I like to believe my elders, and I like to believe what they tell me. And from what our stories say is when Anishinaabe people were created here on this earth, our horses were created with us, as were our dogs. And that's really powerful because that tells you something in how we need to be looking at and treating our horse relatives, right? They weren't here or here when they came with us. They were here with us, right? We were walking together. But what I can tell you genetically is that there was some admixture in the 1970s, and I'll tell you why that was, of a Spanish Mustang, Smokey 169. He was a registered Spanish Mustang from the Dakotas. Because if they didn't do that, we would have no Ojibwe ponies today. Besides that Spanish admixture, the closest genetic relative to Ojibwe horses that we can find are British Isle ponies, not Spaniard ponies. And then I think after that, it's Icelandic horses. So, and what I think is kind of really interesting about this, and I'm not making a claim or trying to draw a conclusion, but if you know anything about Ojibwe people, is that we actually had a big migration from our original homeland was the St. Lawrence Bay area, East Coast. And then eventually we kind of made our way to Sault Ste. Marie, Madeline Island, and then around here. And then real estate issues, you know, brought us more to the west side of the state of Minnesota. That's a joke. You can laugh at my jokes, y'all. It's fine. You're not gonna get hurt by laughing at a joke. I give you permission. But I think it's really interesting that to that east, right? That's where we kind of see our ponies coming from, right? Where we came from too. But like, what if I told you, before talking about all of this, that there was a horse that was native to Minnesota and Wisconsin? Would you believe me? Like I didn't read this on Wikipedia. No. Yeah, plot twist. It does. The ponies do have a Wikipedia page. So their technical name is the Lac La Croix indigenous pony. I think Ojibwe pony is a little easier to say than that. But they're, you know, if we listen to my elders, yeah, they are indigenous here because they've always been with Anishinaabe, right? And we call this kind of our homeland, right? And they also have some really unique behaviors too that you'll see in a lot more of older, more primitive breeds. They like to eat bark for fun. They'll have hay, but no, they like to harass the cedar tree. Our cedar tree is very naked right now because they like to eat cedar and spruce tips. What other animals like to eat cedar and spruce tip? Deer. Yep. And much like us humans, how we love to floss. Hopefully everyone flosses here. Here's your reminder to floss. I hope a dentist is watching this is like, yes. but they will actually, again, whoops, for funsies, right? So usually once a year, and it depends on the horse, but horses get their teeth floated, and it looks like this really long nail file, or like a tool, and they just kind of trim down the horse's teeth a little bit so they wear even, so it's not painful for them to eat, because it can get pretty ouchy sometimes. But these guys will actually just pick up a rock and start chewing it. And we've seen that before, and it's just really interesting. They're really smart, they're really intelligent, they're very stealthy, and the way that they're built. So if we think about some of the forests and kind of ridges around here, they're pretty dense, right? There's a lot of brush. Do you think a really big Clydesdale would be able to move through that easily? No, right? What about these guys? Yep. Yep. They're smaller. Yep. They're smaller. And when you're smaller, you're able to move through brush easier. What else can you do? Yeah, you can go under things easier. I'm thinking about food supply. Think about our winters. Eat less. Yes. They would eat less. And they would have an easier time maybe staying warmer. If you look at their ears, I love their ears. They're little, aren't they? And furry. They stay like that all year long. What do you think small and fuzzy ears do in the winter? Like earmuffs, and maybe prevent frostbite. And then what about in the summer? Keep the flies out, really important. Yep. And they get really, 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 really fuzzy in the winter. The only time that we actually had to blanket these guys in the winter was when it got down to -40. And it was still like, we had to be like, please come so I can blanket you. And they're like, no, I'm fine. I'm like, you're shivering, dude. Like, please. Yeah. So they have kind of a lot of interesting features. They aren't like Justin Timberlake is not their hairstylist from the 90s. Those are natural highlights that they have in their hair. They're called frosted guard hairs. That's kind of another what we call primitive marker. I learned all of this from Leah, by the way. She's given me like really good lingo. And then I don't know if you can see it on this picture, but you'll notice that some of our lighter colored horses, they have a stripe down their back, their spine. It's called the dorsal stripe. And then if you look at some of their legs, they have what's called barring, and it looks like a zebra, right? So these are all, and different types of horses can have these, but they're just really interesting primitive markers that we see on our horses. And what you'll find in our quote unquote breed standard, right? Because like a breed kind of looks like, you know what a golden retriever looks like, right? Because they have kind of a distinct look. So horses can be kind of similar. So all of our horses are solid colored, usually darker. They're going to be around 14.1 hands or smaller. And the temperament's also really important, right? They're friendly. They're really smart. And they're calm. Sometimes to a detriment. You want them to go somewhere and you're trying to shoo them away. No, they walk towards you. They're like, hi, love me. And I'm like, I do, but like not here, over there, right? And they're very curious. Multiple Ojibwe owners will tell you that they could have the best fencing in the world and these horses will still somehow get out. There was a like a couple months ago, two of my other friends who also caretake for Ojibwe horses and us, all three of our horses, like all three groups, like they all got out on the same day. It's like Blue Moon or something. But so, like, and Kimberly Campbell, who helps run Grey Raven Ranch with her partner, Darcy White Crow up in Canada. They do a lot of similar things to us. And they actually kind of are letting us take care of one of their horses, Miss Moo, right now. Kim likes to say that sometimes Ojibwe horses just like to take walks. And they do, as much as I wish they wouldn't, because we're right along a highway. They do. When we find them, yeah. Yes, then we come back. So kind of going back to the question, why haven't you heard of these guys before? They're such amazing, wonderful, beautiful horses, right? Because I can talk them up all day. That's really, really easy for me to do. And even like to give you like kind of more weight to that argument is that all of our caretakers at our organization at the Humble Horse, we're all volunteer. River and I don't get paid for what I do. We pay Leah, but she does a lot of extra work kind of for these horses, right? But for the most part, we do it because we love them. What I can tell you is that we wouldn't have been able to survive without these horses. Here's a picture from the 1930s, and it shows somebody, there's an Ojibwe horse with, I believe somebody from Net Lake. I could be wrong on where this picture is from, but he has a bunch of pulling tack on. So these horses were really, really helpful in pulling deer. Anybody go deer hunting and had to pull a deer through woods? Oh, it sucks. It's terrible. These horses were great at doing that. They were also, who here has had to pull logs and firewood out for heat? It sucks. It would be easier with a horse, right? So these horses really helped us with that, building things like that. We did ride them. And everyone had a horse. And when I say had, right, it was more everyone, hopefully, right, if they treated the horse well, the horse would stay around. We didn't pen up these horses. Oftentimes, these horses would kind of keep close to us in the village in the cooler months. And then we would protect them from wolves during foaling season in the fall, in the summer. But it was very much symbiotic and consensual, right? If we didn't keep these horses penned up, they could leave, right? But they knew that they were safe with us. And so we relied on them as much as they relied on us, truly. The reason why you haven't heard of these horses is that they almost went completely extinct. There was only 4 left in the 1970s. They were scheduled for extermination by the Canadian equivalent of the Department of Natural Resources because they were considered a public nuisance. Too much horse poop around the village, too dirty. Horses do poop a lot. But when people heard about this, several members from Bois Fort and several members from Lac LaCroix First Nation pulled off something called the heist across the ice. I wish I made that up, but I didn't. And in the middle of the night, they took a horse trailer, drove across a frozen body of water, loaded these horses up, and brought them to a sanctuary farm in Minnesota. The problem was these were 4 mares. The last known stallion was killed in the 60s by a white researcher who thought that the horse was a moose. I would like to have a word with the eye doctor licensing board of that area because that is not a moose. Sorry to say. Yeah. So, not a moose. Because it's hunting season, we actually have reflective Velcro collars on the horses. They break away if the horse gets caught on something, so it's completely safe, but it's high vis, so they cannot be mistaken for a moose because that is not a moose. But we almost lost them. That's where the Spanish Mustang Smokey 169 comes in. He was kind of phenotypically, which that fancy word for saying he kind of looked similar to them. That was brought in to kind of revitalize these horses. What I can tell you is that these horses, there used to be thousands of them. When Native people were forced onto reservations, how do you control somebody's movement? Take away their means of transportation, right? How do you control somebody's food? You kill it or you destroy the method that helped them hunt it, right? Because these guys helped us drag deer, they helped us check trap lines. And when you take away those things, and how do you assimilate and destroy somebody's culture? You take away their relatives, whether through boarding school or through their horses. So what used to be thousands that would run like deer, as we were forced onto reservations and the US government wanted us to be reliant on rations and wanted to not move from a space, you take away their horses. White Earth Nation, it's not just like a pun, like a demographic pun. It's called White Earth because when you dig into it, it's all clay. What can't you do with clay? Can't grow food. So it forces you to be pretty reliant on government rations, right? So they take away their horse, or they take away your horses. Oftentimes these horses were sent to glue factories and dog food factories. That is the unfortunate reality. So from the 4 of the 1970s, there's roughly anywhere from 150 to 180 today. Our organization works really, really, really hard to make sure that we're doing things like cryopreservation of equine samples to make more babies in the future. We also make sure that our horses have good genetically matched and sound breeding pairs, right? Unfortunately, most of our herd are half siblings. And there are some really, really nasty breeding coefficients, which basically just kind of tells you the inbreeding level of an animal, or in this case, one of our horses, that are being bred today, right? So we try to really, really make sure that people understand, like, you can't just do this willy-nilly anymore. Basically, there's something called Wright's coefficient, which tells you, right, if you think of ancient Egyptians or like any, like the Habsburgs, like just kind of that blue blood, right? A lot of folks would kind of marry within their families or whatever and have kids, and their kids would end up really, really sick. For horses, they recommend that you don't go over 12.5% of that breeding coefficient number. This little man was not bred by me. He came to us, but we have a horse in our herd that is a breeding coefficient of 40%. That is absolutely unacceptable. So that's why the our kind of breed organization that we work pretty closely with, we really, really encourage people to register their horses. So you actually have to send in a main sample to A&M Texas, and we have our own database that we can confirm, yes, this is an Ojibwe horse. And everyone is so closely related now that sometimes if you don't know the correct parentage of the horse, there could be several different options. It's very problematic, right? And this is where good breed and stewardship practices come in. The Humble Horse as an organization, we are not breeders, but we try to plan sustainable population growth, right? So, I mean, we're not out here like being like, ah, yes, let's just try to get like 5 babies this year, right? We're very, very slow, and we're very diligent, and we make sure that we do have those best genetic partners. And oftentimes we do work with international organizations who might have a good match for our horses, or maybe one of our horses is a good match for them. We did that this summer too. We also were working with Dr. Cassie Bass at UW River Falls on their cryopreservation project. Leah hands-on helped with that as well when she still was a student there. And we kind of just figured out how to best freeze that equine material for future babies, right? That's kind of why you haven't heard of these guys. There's less than 20 in the United States. We take care of 7. And we have one placed up in Fond du Lac. We are a very small organization. We do things pretty much like very scrappy. But we do it because we love these horses. And I want to make sure that somebody out there doesn't learn about them when they're 20. And we're shocked to hear that Ojibwe people were actually horse people too, because we were, and we are. So it's exciting as an organization that we get to be back on ancestral land with our ancestral horses. I can't tell you how beautiful it was earlier this kind of weird winter spring that we had. And we had that beautiful explosion of northern lights that we were so blessed to see down here in Pierce County. And I was able to go out into my front yard / pasture with the ponies, and I was able to look up. And with the ponies right there, I was able to see the northern lights. We believe that those northern lights are of our ancestors dancing. So I hope that some ancestors saw that their horses were back where their land, we belong to this land, right? Land doesn't necessarily belong to us. So those horses and those people that belong to the land are back here. So why should we care, right? Besides me, because I love these horses. I consider them my family. These are all fancy dancy citations from different studies that have shown that any sort of kind of like equine therapy, equine intervention, hugely powerful for not only everybody, but specifically for Native people. They're a huge part of our healing, right? One thing I didn't share is when I was introducing myself in Anishinaabemowin, in my traditional name, Nadamagekwe. It's a woman who helps people, right? And if you kind of read all of these quotes, you see words like horse medicine. You see marks of reclaiming of once was the way of their grandparents and great-grandparents, right? You see they feel like having a relationship and interacting with horses, enhanced identity development, and increased feelings of resiliency in youth. Yes, horses eat a lot of money, literally, right? And they maybe smell a little funky and they're very soft, right? But they are the living embodiment. They are the living personification of resiliency, of indigenous resiliency, of human resiliency. 4 left. Almost completely gone, almost completely snuffed out. So many people have tried to do that to other groups of people, not just Native people, right? But that 4 survived. And we have them here in Pierce County, right? That's what makes them so important and so beautiful. They survived, and they show us that we can survive too. And not only can we survive, but we can also start to thrive. But we need help, right? And a lot of buckets, and a lot of hay nets, and a lot of pitchforks, and a lot of repaired fencing, and broken dreams. Broken dreams in the form of my fencing. But that's why we need to care. And that's why horses are not only important to Native people, but they're important to all of us, right? They can show us that we can break through this. And I can tell you, these horses are also a living embodiment of what good collaboration and allyship can do. The folks who have helped these horses survive haven't just been Indigenous people. They've been people of all different backgrounds and communities. And so they show us that if we work together, we can thrive, we can survive, and we can come back from the point of almost extinction. So this is Tiny. He's very much less tiny, but we still call him Tiny. He's probably going to end up being the biggest horse ever, and he'll still be tiny. He was funny. I can still remember when he found out he can neigh and talk to other horses. He would not shut up. It was just, and like the other horses, you know, they call back and they would talk, and then eventually it's like they just stop. They're like, dude, we get it. Congrats, you can talk. And they just like stopped answering. Or sometimes like there was a time where we had like a motion sensor light in one of our run-ins. And so, you know, I'm like walking and it's dark because it gets dark early in the winter. And I'm walking towards the run-in to feed everybody hay. And all of a sudden the light comes on, right? And I just see this tiny little outline of a tiny little horse. And he just goes, ee! And just runs off into the night. I'm like, okay, dude, like, you make that dramatic exit, right? But does anybody have any questions for me? Yeah, so Rare Breeds Canada back in the early 2000s, I don't really know the full story, but they basically like did a mass like export back to Canada. So many of these horses are found in Canada. Yeah, so we do have visiting days because my husband and I both work full time, and we're always literally something doing. Like I was doing fencing stuff literally up until we left for here, right? So we're always kind of doing something. So usually every third Saturdays we have kind of open visitor. You can find our contact information at www.thehumblehorsewi.org, and you can email that address and we can kind of set something up. And we just like to know because we live on the farm and they live on the farm. As much as I love people like being like, hey, you know, it kind of helps us be more intentional and make the most out of a visit. And we are a 501c3 organization as well. So we are an actual nonprofit. It kind of depends, but usually we aim for 11 to 5. But it really depends on the weather, you know, we kind of really start to slow down, and sometimes we just say sorry, no visitors from like December to March because ice is a liability and I have nothing. Do not sue me, right? Like you can get this coat. Like that's it. I got it on clearance, right? Like but it's for people's kind of safety, and because we are a very small farm, we're hoping to eventually, hopefully, kind of move back closer to River Falls with maybe a little bit bigger piece of land, so we can have more space for the horses in the future. But this is our first home and our first farm, and we got it for the horses. So, yeah.
remember that Ken Burns show about Lewis and Clark, but people actually rode the word horse on their horses.
So some people do. That's actually I call them flight risk collars. But we do have high visibility, like construction orange reflective turnout collars. So they're just pieces of kind of nylon and they have Velcro on it. So they can safely get off if the horse gets caught on something. So the horse is safe. But and they still haven't figured out really how to get them off, which is a great thing for me because they're really, really good at escaping out of things that they're supposed to wear and they don't want to. But yeah, we do have things kind of in place to make sure that they stay safe and our neighbors know we have horses. So yeah, a lot of no trespassing signs.
I'm curious if Tiny has had any medical issues or what.
Yeah, that's always a big thing. I'm kind of amazed. So not that we have seen. However, a lot of congenital genetic issues can take a while to pop up. One thing that we've pretty much as a breed group have kind of unofficially decided, or I wouldn't even say decided, but one thing that we've noticed is our horses are prone to something called laminitis, which I kind of call horsey diabetes. But basically what happens is if like you imagine like a diabetic getting neuropathy, right? It's really painful to walk. The blood flow kind of gets messed up, and they might need an amputation, things like that. I'm looking at Leah. She's like, that's not. But basically, horses have these thing called laminae, right? And it holds their foot together, basically that hoof. And if a horse has access to, say, really rich grass, right, or something really high in sugar, right? Non-structural carbohydrates, that's kind of the technical term. That laminae can get really irritated and really ouchy, and that hoof capsule can actually kind of start just losing integrity and turning. So it becomes really, really painful for them to walk, and eventually, if it's severe enough, they do have to be put down. So that's actually why we keep all of our horses on a dry lot, as much as it looks really picturesque and pretty to see horses in beautiful green lush grass. That could actually be really dangerous for different types of horses. So we are very, very conscious about what kind of hay we feed them, how much we feed them, kind of their nutritional needs. So that's one thing that we're always really cautious and worried about is, once they kind of stop growing and stop going through horsey puberty and that metabolism slows down, what is their metabolic needs going to be? There's other kind of things and symptoms that are associated with things that can come with laminitis. But as of now, I would say the biggest thing that we notice in some of our horses is slight club footing, ever so slight, very, very unnoticeable, does not impact them, does not impact their mobility. Leah, what else? Have you noticed any? Yeah, I'm inviting, for people watching on YouTube, I'm inviting our head trainer up to talk more about some health issues that she's noticed.
Okay. Yeah, so like typically with horses and horses in general, not just with our horses, but so when you're looking at health issues in horses that pop up when you're dealing with a lot of inbreeding or genetic conditions, typically you look at issues that happen in the conformation of the horse. So when we say the conformation, we mean how is the horse put together? Because when you look at a horse as like in the aspect of a performance horse, you want their shoulder to be a certain way and their hip to be a certain way. And, each joint, there's a perfect standard that it should be. And so when you see inbreeding happen, you see things like certain parts of their legs are a little bit longer than they should be, or like maybe their joint like if I have a little bit of like a knock knee when I stand, that happens to our horses too. So typically we see more things like that where it's manageable and it doesn't really affect their day-to-day life.
For now.
Yeah, for now. Those things, obviously, as the horse gets older, you you don't know how it's going to affect them. Same with people, genetic issues can be passed down. And in certain areas of the horse world, especially when you look at certain corners of like the quarter horse world, a lot of times they will intentionally do inbreeding. They call it line breeding. And so you see really exaggerated forms of what could potentially happen if this continues to happen. So what happened in the quarter horses? They have now a 5-panel genetic test that has to happen before any of them are bred, because they could be carrying up to 5 deadly genetic diseases. So we really don't want that to happen, to get to the point where our horses need to be panel tested and disease tested.
Even though really that's what we should be heading towards. Just if everything is negative, that's great, it should stay negative. But because we're starting to see these things, right?
That's why it's so important to test.
So we actually are starting a kind of an outcrossing project as well, where we're hoping to bring in kind of great genetics. Because here's the thing, right? You have a horse that's not an Ojibwe horse, you breed them with an Ojibwe horse, you get half, right? But after 3 generations, if you kind of breed that offspring back to an Ojibwe horse, they're fully genetically Ojibwe, but they have much healthier genetics, because kind of that new genetic inflow of something that's not the Habsburgs, right? I keep making the Habsburgs family, but like that's the only thing.
We're just trying to make sure their family tree doesn't look like a wreath.
And it already looks like a wreath, and we are trying to make it into a bush.
Really getting it branched
We are
out.
doing some intense bonsai management here.
Some laurels. Yeah.
So we're trying to make it grow out a little bit and less this and more this. Because when we start seeing these features, right, and we're starting to notice these things, those are red flags. And there have been people that have been doing really careful genetic breeding and genetic matching for way longer than I've even been involved with these guys. But now we are starting to have a conversations and to actually start doing. So our organization has actually our former stud colt, he's now been gelded, but he was bred to a Sulphur Springs Mustang. So they have a high amount of Spanish Mustang in them. And so she was used as a genetic outcross. And then we have another horse and it's not going to be until years down the line, because she's 2 and you don't breed 2-year-old horses. That's what I believe, at least. You let them be babies, they have to grow first. But eventually years down the line, we're hoping that if it's safe for her, that hopefully we can use her as a potential genetic outcross as well, to bring back some healthier genes. So when I say we're not breeders, we're really not. And I'm an academic, so everything's really slow and technical and has to be looked at and things like that. And so, but Leah has been a huge help, as well as other millions of people who are much more horse savvy. We've really been able to do this. I see some people in the crowd. We've really been able to pull this off because of community support. Because pretty much what I can say is, and the reason why we pay Leah is because she trains the horses. So that is going straight back to the horses to make sure that they're able to be handled, because if they're able to be handled safely, that gives them a better future, right? Forbid something happens to me, right? And they have to go somewhere else. Horses that, are kind of safe and happy, and people feel safe with them, are usually have a little bit of a safer safety net in the future. So pretty much any money we get as an organization goes straight back to them. I say pretty much, but I mean like literally, yeah. That's what we do. So that's a little bit about the humble horse, and I'm kind of looking at time. Are there any more questions?
You use a farrier, or you trim yourself, and how do the horses do with trimming?
We do both-ish. So we have a really, really excellent farrier. I can tell you that they were absolute nightmares in the beginning. When they were farriered, they were not done so in the most
It was
kind
just
way.
very like livestock handling.
Yes,
at
it
that
wasn't,
point.
it wasn't,
Cattle chutes, things like
yeah,
that.
it wasn't, it was very much like, I'm handling a feral horse and I don't have time, right? Because it was a very large herd management situation from what I've heard. And with us, we've very much had to work, Leah, myself, we've worked a lot with picking up feet, touching feet. So initially we've, with some of our horses, we've had to use sedation, but I can happily say in the last year, some people don't need, or some horses, sorry, we say people and kids, some horses, they don't need that anymore. And so I actually was able to take a barefoot trimming class over the summer, just out of my own self-interest. So I do things kind of like, basic rasping, things like that. But we do have a very awesome farrier who comes out and we work with, just everybody. And then Leah comes out too. And so it's like a day, but it is mani-pedi, and some of the kids do not like mani-pedi day, but it has to happen. We also do things like lay down. We have some limestone screenings to kind of simulate natural dry bedrock to help it's almost kind of like a natural nail file. So it kind of helps keep their hooves down too. So any other questions? Well, Chimigwich, Bizendauye, thank you all so much for coming and listening, and I appreciate you having me here. So,
Thank you so much, Em, for sharing with us tonight. Have a good evening, everyone at home.